There were women everywhere, women my age and older, leaning into the bar with their earrings swaying, lined up at the door, sitting at tables, legs crossed, feet tapping rhythmically to the canned music. Me? I had to pick up the baby. I checked my watch and saw that I was already late for the second day running, but I was hungry, and all of a sudden I thought that maybe I'd have a couple of the taquitos everybody else was shoving into their mouths while I finished my drink, and then I'd get in the car, take the back street to Violetta's, and be home just before my wife and see if we could get another meal out of the marinara sauce with porcini mushrooms and turkey sausage. That was when I felt a pressure on my arm, my left arm, and I lifted my chin to glance over my shoulder into the face of Joel Chanowski, who occupied the bay next to mine at Iron House Productions. At first, I didn't recognize him, one of those tricks of the mind, the inebriated mind especially, in which you can't place people out of context, though you know them absolutely. "Joel," I said. He was shaking his head, very slowly, as if he were tolling a bell, as if his eyes were the clappers and his skull the ringing shell of it. He had a big head. Huge. He was big all around, one of those people who aren't obese, or not exactly, but just overgrown to the extent that his clothes seemed inflated, his pants, his jacket, even his socks. He was wearing a tie, the only one of the 76 employees at Iron House to dress in a shirt and tie, and it looked like a toy trailing away from his supersized collar. "Shit, man," he said, squeezing tighter. "Yeah," I said, and my head was tolling too. I felt caught out. Felt like the very essence he was naming. Like shit, that is. "We all heard," he said, and removed his hand from my arm and peered into his palm as if trying to divine what to say next. "It sucks," he said. "It really sucks." "Yeah," I said. And though his expression never changed, he seemed to brighten around the eyes for just an instant. "Hey," he said, "can I buy you a drink? I mean, to drown the sorrow. I mean, that's what you're doing, right? And I don't blame you, not at all. If it was me..." He let the thought trail off. There was a girl 2 stools down from me, her hair pulled up in a long trailing ponytail, and she was wearing a jumper over a little black skirt and red leggings. She glanced up at me, 2 green swimming eyes above a pair of lips pursed at the straw of her drink. "Or maybe," Joel said, "you'd rather be alone?" I dragged my eyes away from the girl. "Truth is," I said, "I mean, I really appreciate it, but like, I'm meeting Clover at the funeral parlor, and to make the arrangements. And I just stopped in for a drink, that's all." Oh man, Joel was practically erupting from his shoes, his face drawn down like a curtain and every blood vessel in his eyes gone waste. I understand completely." On the way out of the door, I flipped open my cell and dialed Violetta to tell her my wife would be picking up the baby tonight because I was working late, and then I left a message to the same effect at my wife's law office. Then I went looking for a bar where I could find something to eat and maybe one last drink before I went home to lie some more. The next day, Friday, I didn't even bother to call in. But I was feeling marginally better. I had a mild hangover, my head still clanging dully and my stomach shriveled up around the little nugget of something. So that after I dropped the baby off, I wasn't able to take anything more than dry toast and black coffee at the diner that was fast becoming my second home. And yet the force of the lie, the enormity of it, was behind me. And here, outside the windows, the sun was shining for the first time in days. I'd been listening to the surf report in the car on the way over. We were getting 6-foot swells as a result of the storm. And after breakfast, I dug out my wetsuit and my board and let the Pacific roll on under me until I forgot everything in the world but the taste of salt and the smell of the breeze and the weird strangled cries of the gulls. I was home by 3, and I vacuumed, washed the dishes, scrubbed the counters, I was 20 minutes early to pick up Xana while dinner was cooking meatloaf with baked potatoes and asparagus vinaigrette. I took her to the park and listened to her screech with baby joy as I held her in my lap and rocked higher and higher on the swings. When Clover came home, she was too tired to fight, and she accepted the meatloaf and the wine I'd picked out as a peace offering. And after the baby was asleep, and we listened to music, smoked a joint, and made love in a slow, deep plunge that was like paddling out on a wave of flesh for what seemed like hours, we took a drive up the coast on Saturday. And on Sunday afternoon, we went over to Tank's for lunch and saw how sad his apartment was with its brick and board bookcases, the faded band posters curling away from the walls, and the deep pile rug that was once off-white and was now just plain dirty. In the car on the way home, Clover said she never could understand people who treated their dogs as if they'd given birth to them. And I shook my head, tolling it, but easily now, thankfully. And I said, I couldn't agree more. I woke on Monday before the alarm went off, and I was showered and shaved and in the car before my wife left for work, and when I pulled up in front of the long, windowless gray stucco edifice that was home to Iron House Productions, I was so early that Rodko himself hadn't shown up yet. I took off my watch and stuffed it deep in my pocket, letting the monotony of work drag me down till I was conscious of nothing. Not my fingers at the keyboard or the image on the screen or the dialogue I was capturing frame by frozen frame. Log and capture. That was what I was doing, hour, minute, second, frame, transcribing everything that had been shot so the film's editor could locate what he wanted without going through the soul-crushing drudgery of transcribing himself. At some point, it might have been an hour in, 2 hours, I don't know, I became aware of the intense, gland-clenching aroma of vanilla chai. Hot, spiced, blended, the very thing I wanted, caffeine to drive a stake into the boredom. Vanilla chai available at the coffee house down the street, but a real indulgence because of the cost. Usually I made do with the acidic black coffee and artificial creamer Rodko provided on a stained cart set up against the back wall. I lifted my head to search out the aroma, and there was Jeannie, the secretary from the front office, holding a paperboard venti in one hand and a platter of what turned out to be homemade cannoli in the other. What? I said, thinking Rodko had sent her to tell me he wanted to see me in his office. But she didn't say anything for a long, excruciating moment, her eyes full, her face white as a mask. And then she shoved the chai into my hand and set the tray down on the desk beside me. I am so sorry for your loss, she said. And then I felt her hand on my shoulder, and she was dipping forward in a typhoon of perfume to plant a kind of sobbing kiss just beneath my left ear. What can I say? I felt bad about the whole business, felt low and despicable, but I cracked the plastic lid and sipped the chai, and as if I weren't even conscious of what my fingers were doing, I started in on the cannoli one by one till the platter was bare. I was just sucking the last of the sugar from my fingertips when Steve Bartholomew, a guy of 30 or so who worked in special effects and a guy I barely knew, came up to me and without a word pressed a tin of butter cookies into my hand. Hey, I said, addressing his retreating shoulders. Thanks, man, thanks. It means a lot. By noon, my desk was piled high with foodstuffs, sandwiches, sweets, a dry salami as long as my forearm, and at least a dozen gray-jacketed sympathy cards inscribed by one coworker or another. Just before quitting time, Rodko appeared, his face like an old paper bag left out in the rain. Joel Chanowski stood beside him. I glanced up at them out of wary eyes, and in a flash of intuition, I realized how much I hated them both. How much I wanted to jump to my feet like a cornered animal and punch them out, both of them. Rodko said nothing. He just stood there gazing down at me, and then, after a moment, he pressed one hand to my shoulder in Slavic commiseration, turned, and walked away.